to In the News with David Lucas, and today the topic of discussion will be surrounding the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis. There was a huge event. By now everybody's talking about it. By now it's all over social media and the news. An African-American man was killed on videotape in broad daylight while other onlookers were there. If you haven't seen the full footage of that videotape, I'm going to ask that you do. If this is the first time that you've tuned into this channel, I'd like for you to like and subscribe and follow me on YouTube and Facebook and join the conversation. You don't have to agree with me. Comments are encouraged. I'd like to know what you think about the topics that I'm bringing forward. More than that, I think these conversations are important. I think they're important for me to be able to express how I feel and what I understand about a certain circumstance or situation. But I also believe it's important that we engage and start discussing these things in our community and abroad. And I think these conversations are important. So, today, I watched that video, the full video clip of Mr. Floyd's encounter with the police. There were two police officers there at the time, and he was handcuffed, and he's on the ground, and he's moaning, and he's complaining and screaming out that he can't breathe. And if you watch the video closely, you're going to see that the police officer is basically resting his body, his knee, on this man's neck to where he can't breathe and he can't move because he's already handcuffed. He's subdued. He can be taken up and put in the police car and arrested and taken wherever they want to take him. But these officers decide not to do that. Instead, one of the officers is standing off a few feet away, protecting this police officer from the crowd that's gathering. People are filming. And basically this goes on for about 6 or 7 minutes, where this cop is basically putting pressure on this man's neck and he can't breathe. Okay? And the man is dying right in front of your face. He's dying on the video. And the officer has no remorse of any sort. He's not trying to place the man under arrest, pick him up, put him in the car, anything like that. He's decided he's just gonna pressure this guy until this guy passes out or dies. No one's stopping him. And there's a couple of problems I have with it is that, first of all, these are trained police officers. Okay? The man is already in handcuffs. Okay? There's next steps in the protocol and procedure that goes on after that. To torment or torture this man is a choice. That is not something that is advised from leaders in the police force. This man can be put in a car and taken away. But what happens is this goes on too long and the man dies on the spot. They bring in an ambulance and carries him off. But by the time they carry him away, it looks to be that he's lifeless at that point. There's no respiration. There's no activity from the people to try to revive him. There's nothing like that. They check his pulse, and apparently there's no pulse and he's dead. Now, a few days later, it comes out in the news A lot of times I don't report on these incidents until until the whole story start to come together. A few days later, it starts to come out in the news that these men have been fired. 4 police officers are fired. Okay? The people in Minneapolis, Minnesota, rightfully, are upset that this happened the way that it did. I mean, if you watch the video, you're going to be upset. I mean, it was emotional just having to sit there and watch this. So, what am I saying? They were fired. But here's the dilemma. They should have been themselves, after this video was released, they themselves should have been arrested for murder. Okay? This was no accident. This was a controlled situation from the start. This man was not resisting arrest. Okay? This was a choice that the police officers made to take this man's life in the way that they did. Now, there's a reason why you have 2 police officers instead of 1 in most cases, and that is because one is supposed to be protecting the other in case the situation gets out of hand. He has some backup. That other police officer is supposed to also advise when he sees this thing going the wrong way. Okay? This was a situation where this situation was under control. Okay? But the police officer in charge at the moment, the one who actually murdered Mr. Floyd, decided he was just going to sit there on this man's neck for 6-7 minutes, and the man couldn't breathe. And he died. So that means that he murdered this man, and the other police officer is complicit. What do I mean by that? I mean that at no point did he try to stop the other officer from doing what he was doing. That means you're engaged. You're engaged whether you want to be or not, and your choice to not stop that situation mean that you are complicit in it, that you complied with this action. So not only should they have been fired, but they should have been arrested for murder. And that's the thing that people are upset about. Number one, the man shouldn't have died on the street like this. He should have been taken into custody. He should have had his day in court. That would have been the end of it. But to take a man's life willingly in a situation like this, where he wasn't fighting back, he wasn't being irate, he was subdued. That's what we see. He was subdued in a controlled environment. He should have been arrested, and that should have been the end of it. But to take a man's life on the street like that, when other people around you are saying, hey, this guy can't breathe, you're on his neck, you need to get off of his neck, you have him in a bad position, he's gonna die right there. They are warning the police that they should do something, that they should stop what they're doing, and they refuse. And here's the thing. This happens all the time. This happens all the time. I'm going to say it again. This happens all the time. It's not always videotaped. It's not always recorded. There's not always someone there in the moment to see it. But this happens in the police all the time. So much so that they felt like this was a normal action that they were taking. And chances are they've done this a number of times. But in those incidents, no one died. But this use of force was lethal, and it was by choice. So, what's going on with that right now is that we have all of these incidents that's happening right now, whether it is we're being attacked by white people who are not police, we're being attacked by the police in all of these different situations. This happens all the time. Here's the deal. We can't fix, meaning me, African Americans, we can't fix racism. I'm going to repeat that. We can't fix racism that's aimed or targeted towards us. We can't fix that. That's something that the outside communities have to do. That's work that the outside communities have to do with all these stereotypes and racism that comes towards the black community. People are upset. They're fed up with it. We're treated like animals to them. And not all people act this way towards us, but we're not the only ones that see this happening. What am I saying? The white community also has a responsibility in this, in that there's work to be done. But by being silent, you're being complicit. Okay? We have friends. I have friends that happen to be white. I have friends that happen to be black, whatever else. I'm talking to you the same way I talk to them. By them not speaking up, they're saying, oh, well, this is just what happens. Maybe the man did something wrong. He shouldn't be in that position. Or, you know, we start looking for excuses to make this right. Okay? Instead of saying, hey, that's wrong. We start to make excuses to rationalize, and we start to say this is a normal action, but it's not. It wasn't intended to be. Okay? These guys are in a position of power, and we comply to that rule of law when they try to arrest us. They put their handcuffs on. We think we're complying with what they want. They decide to take it further and take your life. Okay? There's nothing right about that. We want people to speak up and say, this is wrong. We've got to change this. Okay? Because we're not going to have cameras on every police officer to know every time they're out there making bad choices. We're not gonna have that happen. So we've got to figure out a way to change this. I also want people to understand. The mayor of Minneapolis came out and said these men should be charged with murder. The mayor of the city came out and said these men should be charged with murder. Still nothing has happened. I'm going to be keeping my eye on that. But also, too, be aware of this. Police officers have unions. Okay? Because you might think, well, shouldn't they fear for their job? They could lose their job. Police officers have unions that protect their jobs, that protect them. They have attorneys and different resources already set up in case something like this happens. Okay? In our community, we're walking around doing our normal thing. We may not have an attorney that we can just call if something goes down. We used to have civil groups, NAACP and different ones. If something like this happens, you could call them and get some help. But we don't have that going on anymore. We don't have that kind of a resource. And because we don't, we end up oftentimes having to represent ourselves in courts that are already twisted, that already represents the police, okay, and that already represents the DA, and they have their attorneys, and all of this gets twisted back on the victim, okay? And so I want everybody to understand, for us, these are things that we need to start putting in place. Attorneys that can handle these situations when they come up. More than that, we need to start dealing with the laws in these states that say that these people can use this kind of force and not get arrested for murder. Okay? Because that's something that has to change. Also, I want to say this. It comes to me from a friend. We were having this discussion. And she said, well, you know, you're talking to the African American community, but the African American community is only a small piece of this. We really need the whole country to get involved with this. Okay, to that person, I want to say this, and this is just my opinion, okay? I think we have a lot of African American people who are still walking around here like zombies. They're not engaged. They're not concerned about what's happening in our own community. And we first need to get them activated and acclimated to the fact that these things are still going on even since the 60s and before that. These things are still going on. They're still happening. But many of us are walking around or watching our sports or partying or doing our thing, which is nothing wrong with that. But we're not engaged to what's going on inside these politics and the community and these police issues that we're having. We need to also get engaged. We need to get connected to what's happening in our own community. Now, having said that, I do agree with you. We do want the greater masses, the ones who have a conscience, the ones who have an understanding of, you know, what harm is done to me is harm that's done to you. Okay? We want everybody to engage and feel that. But I also want people to be aware. And I think we walk around being unaware of our circumstances, not having the big picture, not seeing what's going on, and we find ourselves in these dilemmas, no fault of our own, and we could lose our life as a result. Okay? So these are the things that we're talking about. So finally, I want to deal with the situation that's going on now. As a result, people in Minneapolis right now are protesting. Some are rioting. And what's my response and opinion to that? Because a lot of people will say, well, hey, you know, you don't support the police in keeping the peace. I do support them keeping the peace. But I am going to say this. People who are rioting or people who are protesting, they're doing it because the city created the problem. And they're not responding the way that they should. If I go out and kill someone in Minneapolis, I will be arrested. Once they find out it was me that did it, and they have proof that I did it, I would be arrested immediately. But for some reason, these police officers have not been booked. They have not been arrested. Okay? So the law is equal for me and them. They may walk around with a uniform and I do not. They may have a badge. I do not. They might even have a weapon. I do not. But I would be arrested for murder. And I believe they should be arrested for murder. This is David Lucas. This is In the News. Like and subscribe to the channel. Be safe. Take care of your own. And for the people who are in Minneapolis, my heart goes out to you. I just say, keep on fighting the power. Thank you.